Hello everyone, I'm Transformers328 here with a discussion on Smash Ultimate, aka Eat My Ass Infinity War, that'll likely be dated by the time the game comes out, if not earlier. In all seriousness, there are a few interesting things I want to talk about. Let's start by discussing Echo Fighters, quite the talk of the town, so to speak, ever since the term popped up in the Smash Ultimate presentation. Lucina and Darkpin now have a clear moniker to show that they're clones, while going ahead and adding a new one in Daisy. Of course, they probably wouldn't leave it at that, especially given how quickly it is to make them compared to a whole new fighter, so now we have tons of speculation over who's going to make it as an Echo. The four most common suggestions for new Echoes I've heard are Shadow the Hedgehog, Dark Samus, Chrom, and the Octolings. There's tons of evidence and arguments to support this choice for all of them. As Shadow and the Octolings already have a history of being copies of their templates in the home series, Chrom's reason for exclusion could line up well with the fandom's newfound interest in clones, not to mention the hypocrisy with Lucina, and for the former three, their previously existing representation in gameplay was conspicuously absent during what gameplay we've seen so far, implying that they made the playable roster in this fashion. However, there are almost as many counter-arguments for all of them. The Octolings would need to have more ink colors to distinguish them from their templates colors, and Sakurai may see that as too great an effort for a mere Echo fighter. As for the others, the lack of an assist trophy appearance with over 20 assist trophies left unconfirmed means very little, and missing colors and details are circumstantial evidence at best. Chrom's chances are low because he'd add another Awakening character to the fairly overcrowded Fire Emblem roster, which already has 2 Awakening reps, while the rest are 1 to a game or 2. If Fire Emblem gets a new rep, it's more than likely going to be either Almand or Celica for representing the as-of-now latest game, 1 from the mobile game due to its success, and or a new rep from 3 houses to help promote that. Shadow would be the second rep from a pre-existing third-party franchise, even if just as an Echo, which puts Shadow in a far shakier position than most. And of course, Shadow and Dark Samus may have too great of unique moveset potential for an Echo to feel like a huge waste. Originally, I was gonna dismiss many potential Echo fighters due to Darkpin and Lucina, our current Echoes, having so few differences from their templates that even their idle animations were identical, which would look wrong on some characters and left me with only the Octolings and a most likely deconfirmed Galactonite. But upon further inspection, Daisy has a noticeably different idle animation than Peach's, more peppy than Peach's calmer idle motion. That's not much, sure, but it does show that some animation alterations to better suit the character would be an effort Sakurai is willing to go through, to contradictorily make the Echoes still feel like their own character. Or they could be semi-clones, as Melee's clones, even back then, were decently distinct from their bases and still took less time to make than a fully fledged fighter. I do think that some of the suggestions for Echoes, such as Dry Bowser, Shadow Mewtwo, Dark Mennonite, and Blood Falcon, would be better served as alternate costumes a la the Koopalings and Alf. Getting out of the Echo Chamber here, I'm interested in speculating what fully unique characters could make the cut, as Sakurai wouldn't leave us hanging on just the Inklings and Ridley, as spoiled as it makes a Smash fan sound. I mean, can you blame us for that, though? There are 2 characters that I'm at least 90% certain are gonna make it in. King K. Rool and Geno. Sure, neither have appeared in a game outside of Smash 4's Mii costumes for about a decade or 2, but that hasn't prevented many retro characters and seemingly then irrelevant characters from appearing and remaining in the roster. Some have historical importance backing them up, but so do these guys. K. Rool is Donkey Kong's equivalent to Bowser and Nintendo's most recognizable villain that hasn't been included in the roster yet. Geno, meanwhile, could serve as both the retro character of the game, pulling from the SNES this time out of Smash 64, or at the very least, the major representation of the Mario RPGs, as Legend of the Seven Stars was very much the root of the Paper Mario and Mario & Luigi series, with all of them featuring timed hits in some capacity among other things. K. Rool was a big name during the ballot, and Geno's support reaches even to Sakurai himself, who admitted that he wanted Geno in as far back as Brawl in an early 2016 interview about the Mii costume, keeping that thought in the back of his mind when renegotiating Cloud for Smash Ultimate, and thus removing the issues that most third-party characters potentially run into. The only problem I see for Geno's chances is his cameo's removal in the Superstar Saga remake, but that's honestly negligible. After all, just because Sakurai had the rights to use him doesn't necessarily mean that all of Nintendo gets the rights to use him. I'll be more surprised if they don't make it, even as DLC, should they choose to do that. I also imagine Rex and/or Pyra and Decidueye having strong chances of making it. Both are recent characters with tons of people loving them in their games and wanting them to be included, not to mention high moveset potential. The only hindrance I can see for at least Rex and Pyra, outside of whether or not to make them a duo character, is that Xenoblade 2 may have been made far too late for them to make the base roster, leading people to speculate that Elma from Xenoblade X made it in their stead, though that just means they're almost guaranteed if they decide to go with DLC. By contrast, Decidueye has the benefit of being a Pokemon, and thus having the clout to give Sakurai an early concept of the Pokemon for him to work with as a potential Smash fighter, a la Greninja in Smash 4. Some say they just skipped to a Gen 8 rep, but I'd argue that if Smash Ultimate's roster was finalized around 2016, And that means Gen 7 wasn't even out yet. Again, Allegra Ninja. Even if he doesn't make it, Decidueye could still be DLC. Speaking of popular reps from first-party series, Bandana D may get to see his time in Smash, as very few of the counter-arguments I've heard really hold much water. He's basically a generic enemy, sure, but that's something fairly unique to the roster and can bring some brilliant levity by having him be able to defeat heavy hitters like Ganondorf and Ridley. And ever since his major debut and return to Dreamland, he's become as significant and recurring to the Kirby series as mainstays like Deity and Meta Knight, both of whom have missed recent games that he appeared in. To be honest though, I've become much more convinced of Marks being the next major Kirby rep, thanks to his appearance in Star Allies. I think he's already got a Smash-ready moveset that's fairly dynamic and fun, would be a cool and fairly iconic villain to add to the lacking villain count, is quite recurring thanks to Mass Attack and the aforementioned Star Allies, granting him relevancy if that's such a sticking point, and does a better job fulfilling the Sakurai bias quota since he is one of his characters. Unfortunately, Marks' relevancy and biggest claim to Smash stems from DLC for Star Allies, both of which were released very shortly after Smash Ultimate's teaser, and I doubt that Marks was as strong a Smash candidate as Bandana D back in 2016 when Sakurai likely finalized the roster. DLC perhaps. The last Nintendo character I imagine making it in is Springman. From ARMS. Or at least a character from ARMS, but Springman's the most likely since he's the game's poster boy. A long-range variation of Little Mac can certainly bring a unique angle, but he runs into the same problem as Rex and Pyra, potentially arriving too late to be included. On top of that, ARMS was at the time of development an untested IP that easily could have flopped, so including him could have backfired. I can see him making it as DLC though. Aside from Geno, Simon, Belmont, and Rayman have gotten a lot of clout as potential third-party newcomers. And I get why. Rayman already had a presence in Smash as a trophy in the last game, and the Mario and Rabbids game shows that Ubisoft and Nintendo have a strong relationship, so that increases Rayman's chances. However, given that getting all the pre-existing third parties to return to Smash was most likely a massive headache for Sakurai and Nintendo, I doubt they'll want to approach another separate third party for a newcomer, even if Ubisoft would be willing to cooperate. At least Geno and Simon Belmont are from those pre-existing third parties, allowing Sakurai and Nintendo to get them during the renegotiations for Cloud and Snake respectively. Plus, as mentioned during Smash 4, his amiibo would be a nightmare to design. And leave the Rabbids as assist trophies if they have to be in at all. Speaking of Simon, he's gotten the most traction not just because of the aforementioned fact about third parties, but because Vergeben, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, leaked his inclusion in a leak that was right about everything else. Except he missed the return of the other missing veterans and Daisy as an Echo, so that puts his credibility into question. Even so, Simon's been a fairly common request even during the Brawl days, sometimes jokingly to reunite the Captain N crew, but also because he would hold a lot of unique moveset potential and is the most iconic hero of a popular game franchise, which could bring a gothic, even somewhat horror character to the series, which it also lacks. The problem then would be what design of his would they use? An old school design, Chronicles, Judgment, any combination of the prior choices? I doubt they'd just make him an NES sprite like the Harmony games. He's also not the most recurring character, as he hasn't been a major character in the series since Judgment, or discounting spin-offs, reimaginings of the original games such as Chronicles and Super 4. As I said for K. Rool and Geno, relevance isn't a make-or-break point, even for third parties, as Mega Man was included during his series' hiatus, but I do imagine it being a factor. Now, is there a character I would personally want in Smash regardless of how realizable they'd be? Yes, aside from Marks. Sora from Kingdom Hearts. He's an iconic gaming character, the star of one of my personal favorite games ever, and Sora could bring a lot of unique moveset potential despite still being another anime sword fighter in some fashion. He'd fit well, he'd be fun to play as, could represent other kinds of crossover games if historical relevance is what Sakurai's looking for in third-party reps, and he wouldn't need the Disney elements in his moveset or representation, as Kingdom Hearts has more than enough original material to pull from. He's also a relevant character now given Kingdom Hearts 3 is on the horizon, and while more of an unspoken, most likely coincidental rule, he's been on Nintendo handhelds plenty of times. The only major obstacle I can imagine stems from this video from HMK, which ironically reassures his chances by clarifying that, while Disney legally owns Sora, Nomura has the final say in whatever is done with the character, and they'd be fine with letting him in if Nintendo got enough requests to approach Square about it. However, this most likely means that the negotiations haven't happened yet, and the best chance to get him, during renegotiations for Cloud, has passed. So his chances on the base roster are on par with Marx's. Maybe if the outcry is loud enough he can make the cut as DLC, but as much as I'd love to see him, I'm not holding my breath. And one last oddball addition is Master Hand himself. Back in Melee, if you do a specific thing to glitch the game, you could legitimately play as the big boss of the game, complete with a fully playable moveset. most likely for the AI to register the moves. Sure, he couldn't win without crashing the game in regular modes, but he was otherwise completely playable in battle, making him so far the only veteran not to return in Ultimate. Besides, I'm sure that play as Master Hand rumors and cheats fly around for every other Smash game, so why not put them to rest with a surprise character reveal? Perhaps not made until the game itself comes out. I don't imagine him being played seriously, so he could be a separate mode a la Galactus in Ultimate Marvel 3. This seems incredibly unlikely, but I'd love to see this happen so that truly, absolutely, and completely everyone is here. I don't expect every single character I mentioned to make it to the roster, as I do recall Sakurai telling us not to expect too many newcomers since that time was taken up by the missing veterans. But those are just ones I'd like to see and some common choices for the fanbase at large. We'll just have to wait and see for future announcements. I'm Transformers328 and I just made an entire video about a game I'm most likely not going to be playing for a long time.